Hello? Okay, well, I had planned a story, completely forgetting that it's Halloween coming up. So I'm going to tell another story. It's a story I've told so often I could tell it in my sleep because it's a true family story. Back in the 1930s in the state of Oklahoma in America, my grandma and grandpa were having a really hard time. Grandpa wasn't working. It was during the Great Depression, and there in Oklahoma, they had the Dust Bowl. Grandpa was a farm worker, and nobody was hiring. Well, they had two little babies. That was my mama and my Aunt Carlene. And Grandma used to take in sewing so that she could earn a little bit of extra money to feed the babies with. Now, she didn't own a sewing machine. She sewed everything by hand, but she made the prettiest, tiniest little stitches of anybody around there. So she got quite a lot of sewing jobs. Well, one day when she was sitting out on the front porch, and she saw someone come walking down the road, and it turned out to be Aunt Hattie. Now, Aunt Hattie had a bundle of pretty yellow material under her arm, and she wanted my grandma to make her a Sunday go-to-meeting dress. Well, Grandma was right happy to do it because she knew that Aunt Hattie still had some money left. So she took that pretty yellow material into the house and laid it out on the table and commenced to cutting it out into the shape she needed to make a dress. As they were doing that, as Grandma was doing that, they were standing around gossiping like they do sometimes. And Aunt Hattie was telling my grandma about the strange goings-on down to the graveyard. People had been seeing this here monster running around the graveyard at night. Aunt Hattie herself had been walking along late one night after dark, and she saw these two big red glowing eyeballs staring at her over the graveyard fence. Well, she took on off down that road, and she didn't go out after dark for a long time after that. Well, my grandma listened to this, but she didn't believe in no monsters, and she told Aunt Hattie so. Well, Aunt Hattie was right put out because she knowed what she'd seen with her own two eyeballs. And she said to my grandma, she said, Hazel, that was my grandma's name, Hazel. She said, Hazel, I bet you can't go down there to that graveyard tonight and not come out till more. Oh, I want you to go down there to that graveyard tonight and not come out till the sun comes up or till you have finished sewing my pretty yellow Sunday go-to-meeting dress. Well, Grandma wasn't scared, so she decided she'd do it because Aunt Hattie said she'd pay her twice what she had going to been to pay her if she'd do that. So she bundled up that pretty yellow material and put it in a basket along with needles and thread and scissors and a candle so that she could see what she was sewing, and she went on off down to the graveyard. Found herself a nice headstone to lean up against, took everything out of the basket, lit the candle, and commenced to sewing. Well, nothing happened. She didn't expect it to. But then late in the night, the ground in front of her started trembling and shaking, and out of the ground come this big old ugly head with those two big red glowing eyeballs, just like Aunt Hattie had said. That thing opened up its big old ugly mouth and it said, Lady, do you see this big old ugly head of mine? Grandma said, I see that, but I'm a-sewing on this. And she kept right on a-sewing. Well, that monster looked at her a little while longer. And then he started pulling one of his big old ugly arms up out of the ground. And he reached for my grandma, and he was reaching and straining, but he couldn't quite reach her. And he said, Lady, do you see this big old ugly arm of mine? My grandma said, I see that, but I'm a-sewing on this. And she kept right on a-sewing. She was sewing just a little bit faster than she had been before, but she kept right on a-sewing nonetheless. Well, that monster started pulling one of his big old ugly legs up out of the ground, and he said, Lady, do you see this big old ugly leg of mine? My grandma said, I see that, sir, but I'm a-sewing on this. And she kept right on a-sewing. Monster had it. Wasn't going to put up with no more of this nonsense. People sitting around sewing while he was trying to scare him, and he started pulling his other big old ugly leg up out of the ground. He got his knee up out of the ground. He got his ankle up out of the ground. He was pulling his toes up out of the ground. Just about then, Grandma was finished with that pretty yellow Sunday go-to-meeting dress. She bundled it up, put it in the basket along with the needles and the thread and the scissors and the candle, remembering to blow the candle out first, of course. She jumped up, said, "It was nice talking to you, sir, but I gotta go now." And she ran across that graveyard, jumped over the graveyard fence, ran down that road with that monster running after her, saying, "Stop, lady, because I want to eat you." But my grandma wasn't the kind of woman what was going to let no monster tell her what to do. So she kept right on going. Ran in through her front gate, ran up on the front porch, ran through the front door, slammed the door. That monster got there after, was beating on the front door. And the sun come up. Turn that monster into a puddle of green slime right there on the front porch. Later that morning, while Grandma was mopping up the green slime, Aunt Hattie come along, saw that pretty yellow Sunday go-to-meeting dress. She'd never seen anything so pretty, and she paid my grandma twice what she had been going to pay her. But you know what? She never even noticed that some of them tiny stitches was just a little bit longer than some of the others was. True story, I wouldn't lie to you.